Hi, I'm Tim Sanders. I'm the head of AI research at G2 and an executive fellow at the Digital Data Design Institute at Harvard.
Hi, I'm Yiannis Broustas. I'm the vice president of product marketing at UiPath. And on my free time, I teach startups at NYU.
So UiPath, stunning pivot. The OGs of RPA, the spearhead of agentic automation. That's a major transition. I mean, it's literally deterministic to probabilistic, and it's fast. Talk to me about how your customers are making that transition, given the environment.
You use the word pivot, and this is a big debate that we're having because we don't see it as a pivot, we see it as an evolution. And an evolution of a journey that started with our customers and with organizations around the world with automation, started with our RPA. It expanded to more holistic end-to-end automation. And now, by adding the agentic layer, the next part or the missing piece of what our vision was always about, it's an evolution. So the way that we're experiencing it, I don't know if you remember this morning, one of our long-term customers said that automation allowed us to do 80% automation within a certain workflow. And now agents are coming to take us from 80 to 99% or even 100%. Hence, it's not about what do I need to replace, but it's what can I enhance with AI and with agents on top of what I've already been doing for some time.
That's right. So what I see in this evolution that you're making is thinking more end-to-end instead of taking pieces of an end-to-end process and automating those for a net increase in productivity. I was talking to a researcher who does a lot of work on tool calls for agents, and he talked about the idea that for him, traditional automation, he said you look at it like a buffet, like where you get the green beans, dessert, and the iced tea, okay? With agents, you get the buffet. And so I think that looks like what that transformation is like. But how do you take customers along who are very satisfied with RPA's dependability, and you're going to move them into a more dynamic environment, albeit more end-to-end? How do you take the customer with you on that?
So I'll represent it with a very simple saying, which is think big, act small. I'm a bit sensitive when I hear the term end-to-end because that's the objective, that's the destination, that's the vision. But to get to end-to-end, you cannot start with end-to-end. You start with the pockets of value, and once you start adding more and more and more of those pockets of value, you're getting closer and closer to end-to-end. I am not a believer that an agent is gonna start top-down and it's gonna take over the entire workflow and figure it out on the go, because that's gonna fail, right? Back to trust and governance that we were discussing earlier. On the opposite way, if you think like that, but then you start small and you say, okay, in my purchase to pay, I'm gonna start with invoicing as a workflow, and I'm gonna start there, and then I'm gonna go and do a sister workflow and another sister workflow and another brother activity, and I start stitching them together. Guess what? You are starting with these pockets of value, which you're optimizing one by one or in parallel, and eventually you get into this unified experience that is close to end-to-end. Is it 100%? Maybe yes, maybe not, but it's very close to it.
I like that, and so I'll play with you. Let's play dual professor here a little bit. So one of the exercises I like to use with students is let's ratchet up to the higher order processes and then taskify our way to the bottom, okay? So higher order process, if you're a chief revenue officer, is revenue production. Who does that? Regional vice president of sales is responsible for a current revenue production. That's a process, okay? It's an end-to-end process. But there's processes underneath that, right? So there's account management's a process. Within account management, there's onboarding and activation. That's a process. There's renewal. That's a process. There's lead generation to get all the way to the first human being meeting. That's a process. Now that's where I think end-to-end is fascinating, is in the sub-processes, not the meta processes, right? So for example, at G2, our data is suggesting one of the fastest agentic adoptions right now is simply generating sales accepted opportunities for nurturing, right? It's not that much of a multi-turn agent, but it still contributes a heck of a process to the overall picture because of the cost and the time to traction for human BDRs. So that's a situation where it's not generating the CRO revenue directly, but it solves a very specific problem of feeding the AEs, a cadence of meetings that then plugs into the Uber processes.
And I will say that you made it sound very linear and very smooth. The reality is that those sub-processes are not as clear in taxonomy as you described them, because some of them are higher, some of them are lower, some of them are wider, some of them are deeper. So it's not only the fact that you start from the Uber process into the sub-processes and you go down in taxonomy, but some of them are multi-levels, some of them are one level, some of them go up to the CRO, and some of them the CRO never experiences. So it's also the multi-process and the multi-levels of these sub-processes and pockets of value that I used as a term earlier that will allow you to then go and say, I've managed to automate the entirety of the process or a big part of the process.
Oh, I love that. And I think it's even company to company, right? So I'll give you an example. Back to AI sales agents. It all depends on your total addressable market, right? So it's like you wouldn't have heavy automation of outbound if you have a small TAM because you've only got 5,000 prospects in the world. You probably want a human to touch all of those. On the other hand, if you've got a massive TAM with 500,000 potential customers, you're never going to reach that book with humans anyway. So your tolerance for automation is going to be higher. So I find what you say is true, but it's even more complicated, right? It's not just the sub-processes by category and taxonomy. It's company by things like total addressable market. So it's very interesting.
And I'm going to add to that, agentic automation is industry agnostic, use case agnostic. You can automate pretty much everything in a business. What it is not agnostic though, it's the regional complexities of a global business. And it's a very different thing if you're applying agentic automation in an organization that speaks only one language versus an organization that speaks 5 languages or 10 languages because they are deployed and they have business all around the world.
That's right.
And it's a different...
Because you're going to get more latency as it's trying to do translation in real time. I get it.
And what if you are an organization like a Japanese Toyota that has multiple different business units that have nothing to do with them, with each other, right?
And don't like to talk to each other, as we learned from Sony's case study.
Even if they do. It's very different mentality and different culture if you're producing cars versus producing engines or versus producing anything else, and anything in between. So I don't know how you're experiencing that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think we haven't had enough time in this test time for agents to really understand the global implications. We're so laser focused on what's going on in the United States. We're kind of getting focused on EMEA. We're starting to pay attention to China, but that ain't the whole world. Yeah. When the whole world comes around to it, I think that regional customization at the platform level will be a breakthrough strategy.
I agree.
Because there's cultural issues here too. Right?
I agree.
So I know for a fact that in certain parts of Asia, explainability and transparency are not valued. In fact, they're considered barriers to adoption, meaning too much time explaining, for example, drugs. So you don't hear drug commercials in China give you all the complications. They just say this is the drug and the government allows it to be sold. Even though here in the United States, because of the explainability cultural ethos, we tell you all the things that can happen. That's coming to AI. In certain countries, they don't want to tell you you're working with the bot because they think you won't use it. They just say, here you go, you're going to get your solution. Here we say it's a bot. So I think cultural implications are going to have a big difference too about how we implement agentic automation.
I agree.
So it's great talking to you, Yiannis. Where can we get more of your wisdom?
Tim, listen, I don't know where you can find me, but we all know where we can find you. It was such a pleasure to be with you, to talk with you, to have you among us today. Obviously, UiPath represents part of this agentic vision. Our agentic automation value proposition is all about agents, robots, and people working together. But I know that at G2, you're doing this phenomenal research as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, man. Great talking to you, buddy.